Hello, my PBC family and friends. Pastor Brian here with you. Another quick bite, living the Word. And today our word is going to come from Psalm chapter 21. And I want to start by saying, have you ever just met those people who are just seem like they're happy all the time? I mean, we all have our moments, and we all have our moments of downtime. But those people who just genuinely, for the most part, you would define their life as happy characters, smiling all the time, just seem like everything seems to go well for them all the time. Well, you know what's interesting to me about that is when I've gotten to know these people like this in my life, I've discovered that it's not that they're without troubles, it's not that they're without trials, it's not that they have this perfect life. It's that their life is at perfect peace. And what I mean by that is this: they figured out the key to being glad all the time, able to smile all the time despite adversity, despite troubling times, and despite heartache. They figured out how to find joy in every moment of life. And now there's times that they'll even admit to me that they have doubts, they have worries, they have things where if you're around them, you think, oh, they're not joyful at this moment. But still, even when you're around them in those moments, my experience has been there's just a deep-seated kind of like they're okay with life. They're just happy. They just have joy about them. And what really brings that about in somebody? Well, and I pray this is a character we all strive for, right? And but what really stood out to me as I was thinking about this, it comes from Psalm 21, and I want to read verse 6 to begin with, and then we're going to go down. We're going down from that point. But Psalm 21, verse 6, we read these words: "For thou hast made him most blessed forever; thou hast made him exceeding glad with thy countenance." Now, David, the writer of the psalm here, is talking about the king himself, right? And how everything in his life, God has just blessed him and taken care of. Now, when you think about David's life, you wouldn't necessarily find it that way, right? As a young boy, he was kind of the runt of the litter, so to speak, and so his dad had very little respect for him. And then after he gets anointed by Samuel to be the next king of Israel, Saul, the king of Israel, seeks to destroy David and pursues him and chases him. And so, I mean, these are not times I go, oh, well, that God was definitely making my life perfect if I was David, right? And then even as a king, right? You think about things that David went through. He went through the rebellions from his own household and things of this nature. So you think about David's life, and you wouldn't necessarily find it as something that you would say, oh, that was just a joyous, happy, all the time smiling, kind of glad life. But here David says, speaking of what God has done for him, and after giving all the things that God had done for him, this length of days and glory and salvation, honor, majesty, all these things like this, he says, "For thou hast made him most blessed forever." And listen, "thou hast made him exceeding glad with thy countenance." Now here's the key. That idea of that exceeding glad with thy countenance literally means that David was smiling all the time, but not because of his countenance, but because of God's countenance. He was happy and glad and excited and exceeding glad, beyond glad. Didn't make sense glad because of God's countenance, not because of his own. See, those people who are like that I've met, they are those people who God's countenance kind of comes through. They seem exceeding glad and happy and joyful all the time. Even in the midst of terrible moments in life, they can have that exceeding gladness, even though there's mourning, even though they're sorrowful. Why? Because God's countenance is coming through. And then verse 7 explains why they would have God's countenance coming through. It says, "For the king trusteth in the Lord, and through the mercy of the Most High he shall not be moved." See, here's the thing. If we truly trust in the Lord, his countenance will come through. Why? Because we recognize that he's got mercy for us, and that will make us steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, as 1 Corinthians would tell us in chapter 15. That's the point, is that if we would just put fully our trust in the Lord. Something in my Bible study this morning with Miss Chandra that kind of stood out to me as we were talking about things is I think that's part of why our nation here anyway, and I know there's some of you listening overseas and stuff like this, but I know our nation here, why so many Christians in our nation here are having such a hard time here. Because we put our trust in a government. We put our trust in a constitution. We put our trust in ourselves. We put our trust in our prosperity. We put our trust in so many other things. So when those things started to get challenged or hit a rough patch, so to speak, or whatever the case may be, all of a sudden our joy, our gladness seem to be gone. But the point of the matter is, if for those who have stayed upon the Lord, put their trust only in Him, that His countenance will come through so that we can be exceeding glad no matter what we face. I hope this encourages you today. I know it encouraged me and challenged me to make sure I keep my eyes stayed upon Jehovah. Why? So that His countenance may shine through me. I love you. We love you. God loves you. And God's got this.